Okay, I'm talking about Foucault, and this is a little weird because I had to read the PDF on my computer, so I don't have the book in front of me. So I'm going to be talking from notes, and we will do as well as we can. I think this essay is really cool. He's talking about, and we talked about this a bit in class, the history of the body. And what he means by that is body is one of the discourses that goes along and either does or bump up against the episteme or reflects the episteme somehow. And he's talking about the body specifically in terms of ways in which it might be disciplined. When he talks about discipline, he wants to separate it from the way Althusser would talk about it. So he says specifically that this is not a state apparatus, not an ideological state apparatus, the ISAs that Althusser was talking about. Instead, he says it's a strategy, a network of relations. So something more like this. And by strategy, he means something that one does. And by network of relations, he means something like this. So that one exercises power, one does not possess power. And this probably reminds us of Judith Butler talking about how one performs sexuality or gender instead of being a gender. He also talks about, and we talked about this in class, and I think I talked about it in my last video also, power knowledge, and how knowledge of someone is power over that person, or power over that person is the same thing as having knowledge of that person. And so if we think again about the analogy I was making about schools, then he would be talking about how the teacher knows things about you and has power, not has power, exercises power over you, although that's going to get complicated in just a second. He then goes on to talk about different strategies for disciplining the body. And one of them that he talks about a lot less is a leper colony, where you just push everyone to the side. But the one that he's more interested in is the way the plague was handled. And it was so weird when I was reading this because it seems so familiar to us now during being locked down. But during the plague, you isolate people, you have inspections to make sure that people are where they're meant to be, you observe them, you quarantine them. There are a lot of, there are people in power who are observing you, and they are everywhere. One of the problems with this, it's not that this strategy doesn't work, but it's not very economical, and it only works when someone is looking at you. He contrasts this strategy with the strategy of Jeremy Bentham's panopticon. And in class, I'll show you some pictures of how this works, or maybe I'll even send them to you. But the panopticon is a really cool style of a prison where you have in the middle this tower, and then all around the tower are these cells, and you don't even need bars on the cells because whoever is in the tower can just look and see what everyone is doing in all of the cells around the tower. And the best thing about the tower is that it's organized so that no one, the prisoners, can't see whether anyone's actually in the tower or not. So there's a guard with a gun, maybe, you don't know, but you always act as if there is a guard with a gun because there might be. And in that way, the prisoners discipline themselves. They take on the responsibility for disciplining their bodies, Foucault would say. And it ensures the automatic functioning of power, which is to say that power functions, that it doesn't need to be exercised or instantiated in all of these people who are walking around with to ensure during the plague or during a quarantine that you're doing what you're meant to do, that it functions seamlessly. Okay. one of the things that has to be true in the way that this panopticon works is that power has to be visible. The possibility of it has to be visible, but it always has to be unverifiable. That you have to see the tower, but that you're never sure whether anyone's in it. And in that sense, anyone can exercise power. It doesn't have to be a military or a state apparatus. It can be anyone who knows something about you, who can see you. He says that a real subjection is born from a fictitious relation. And what he means there is by the fictitious relationship between a guard in a tower and a prisoner, but the guard might not be there, but you really are a subject, subjected to the power, even so. This is a very economical way to exercise power, and it also works outside of the prison. It's a way of creating, as Foucault says, a disciplinary society, so that schools, hospitals, prisons, workplaces, he gives us so many examples, function this way. And probably also just functioning this way would be educational, like dorms, is the first example I can think of that's totally relevant here, that it gives us different loci for locating the people who might be watching us. And what you want to think about is how you discipline yourself when someone might be watching, and how you are the one who makes sure that you get to class on time because I might notice, or you're the one who wears the clothes at all because someone might notice, right? Think about how different you would act if someone were always watching you, or more to the point, if you're not sure whether someone was watching you. So if you had, this is bringing back to your dorm, like a one-way mirror on your door or the bathroom door or something, think about how different your relationship would be to your body, or your relationship would be to your actions. And that's the kind of dispersal of power that he's talking about. Power is dispersed amongst us, that it's a strategy that keeps us all disciplining ourselves so that we don't need a state apparatus to come in. We don't need a military apparatus to come in or discipline us the way we might do under plague conditions, because instead we're all keeping track ourselves and making sure we don't do something that would get us, that would exclude us from society. We become self-disciplining because we're never sure that someone is watching, but we know someone always could be watching. Okay, we're going to call that good, and I'll see you in class.